Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are at. I'd just like to first thank the Philadelphia Masonic Temple and Museum for having me as a speaker today. My name is Drew Mackinnon. I am a Mason out of Southern California, Saddleback Laguna Lodge, number 672 in Orange County, California. A little bit about myself. I'm a researcher, father, craftsman, dreamer. I've been traveling extensively the last 10 years to different ancient temple sites all throughout the world. And today I'm going to present with you guys a temple site in India that I had the privilege and honor of visiting last year. Now, when it comes to temples, it's very, very important that you do your research, because otherwise, you can kind of get lost in the symbolism and the meaning behind these places, and then we attribute it to just appearing out of nowhere. So I'm going to present to you on Kailasha Temple. Everybody can see the screen, thumbs up. Okay, let's begin. Now, I named this Temples of the Initiate because different temples all throughout the world have a message, and it's hard to dissect what the message is without being present within the temple. Now, when you enter a Masonic lodge, there's a feeling, there's an energy to it, there's a harmony to it. Now, all throughout the world, whether it's a cathedral, a mosque, a mandir, Hindu temple, synagogue, there's energies in these places, and they're developed in a way that can resonate with the initiate. When I say initiate, the person who is entering the temple space, who is going there on a pilgrimage perhaps, or just going as a visitor. I've been to several temples where I had no background, and when you go to them, you initially feel some sort of energy. Doesn't matter if you believe in a higher deity or if you don't. There's something to these ancient sites that resonate with you when you visit them. Now, this is Kailasha Temple, and Kailasha Temple is the abode of Shiva, one of the major deities in Hinduism. It's a replica of the holy mountain of Kailash in the Himalayas. Now, Mount Kailash is essentially where Shiva lives in the Vedic texts. It's a mountain in the Himalayas. It exists today. You can't climb it. You can't go anywhere near it. It's very mysterious. It's also a pilgrimage site in itself. So Mount Kailash, the site that I'm going to share with you, is a replica of Shiva's dwelling place, essentially. Kailasha Temple is in Maharashtra, India, which is about an hour flight out of Mumbai in a town called Aurangabad. It's now called Aurangabad. This temple site is known as the Axis Mundi, the point between Earth and the heavens. It's made out of ancient volcanic material, basalt, which is one of the hardest stones on Earth to this day. And this site is so unique in its own being because it is built from the top down. This is made from one single side of a mountain, volcanic mountain. And allegedly it was made with chisels and hammers in the 7th century. And why they think it was made in the 7th century is because King Krishna I was a worshiper of Shiva. And that's where they kind of get that date. And there was also some imagery and some later inscriptions that cited him. But with any ancient site, it's impossible to really date them. So this is a cave complex, and it's not just this site. There's 34 other temples along a whole pathway when you go to visit this site. This particular one is 300 feet long and 175 feet wide. And why is this site so important? Now, when I started researching it, I was just enamored by its beauty. So as you can see in this picture here, it's basically built into a cave. So when you're looking at it from the front, this is an aerial shot of it from the front here. Let me get a little laser pointer on here for you guys. I'll show you. The diagram I have over on the left here is basically an artist rendering of the site itself. So it faces west to east. So you're entering from the front here where the laser's at, coming in here. This is the east over here. The north is going to be on the left side, south on the right side. And you can see that this was carved straight down. And another thing that's unusual about the site, none of the material, the basalt that was removed, has ever been found. And they are speculating that it was between 400,000 and 500,000 tons of basalt that would have had to been removed to create this design. So when you enter a Hindu temple, there is a circumnavigation that you would do. You're always going to enter through the first gate here. And when you see these small windows, this is to give the initiate or the devotee or just the visitor that this temple is looking back at you with these small window spaces. So when you enter this temple, you are going to do a pradakshina, which is Sanskrit for, somebody's got a microphone on. So you're going to go left. And when you go, you're going to go towards the north. You're going to go back. And the whole time you're in these temples, you will see devotees that are doing mantras as they go around. There's a lot of different sects in Hinduism. There's several different, there's one thing in Hinduism when you're researching it, it's called Ishta, and they choose a deity. There's no wrong way to be present in this space. There is no, you can worship any deity you want. It's just you're respecting the space. So these are open to anybody. So when you come in to this temple, you're going to navigate it this way, going to go all the way around. Now in these these little cutouts that you see here where I'm highlighting, there is deities all carved within this. So this space not only is built from the top down, it is essentially built from the top down and then it goes into the side of the mountain further. So there's a full corridor that you will see. You will see Vishnu, who is the preserver god in Hinduism. You're going to see iconography of Brahma. Brahma is the deity, the creator deity of all. Is usually showcased by having 4 heads in the 4 cardinal directions. And then you're going to see Shiva at this temple. And Shiva is the destroyer of fear. So as we're going through this whole temple site, you're going to see these 2 pillars from the last slide. Pardon me. This right here, you have 2 pillars when you come in. These are called stambhas. Now, these are the access mundi in Dharma. So the cosmic point between the celestial world, the cosmic, so our spirit, and then you're coming down to the ground here. So the point between us and the divine, it's a representation of our presence in this space. So when you go to this temple and you're doing these navigations around it, this temple speaks to you. These are not just, hey, when you're watching Ancient Aliens or you're watching these different shows, it's aliens made this. We don't care about the symbolism, right? So they can critique this and say it was cut with a laser or whatever they want to say, but there is a story in stone that the ancient stonemasons and architects were teaching us. And this temple has a representation of our dharma, our will in life. It has a representation of karma. So dharma in Hinduism is basically our actions and how we act. Karma is a result of our actions. So this is a representation of that black and white, right? It's like this blend of presence and being. I just wanted to show these columns one more time. These are 2 pictures I took of the columns. Like I said before, this is built from the top down. So can you imagine how difficult this would be to do? And these columns, if I recall, are about 80 feet tall. You can see the bottom picture here on the left. You have some devotees down here. I took this from a bridge. There's multiple bridges, multiple windows. All these are representations of the being looking back on you. It's like if you're in a temple, any sort of temple, there's a presence to it. Everything has purpose, the orientation, how you go around it, how you navigate it. So as you can see here, on the left, there's an image of Shiva in between 2 of the columns. You can see it over here on the right as well. This is depicted all throughout the temple complex. And it's a reminder, before I continue, commentaries is a big term I use when I'm explaining anything. If you read ancient Vedic texts, and Vedic texts are the holy scriptures essentially of Hinduism or Dharma. So, and then through the teachings, you have swamis who do commentaries on these texts, whether it's the Bhagavad Gita, all these major epics, all these stories, there's swamis and teachers that are basically given a commentary. So today, this is my commentary on the site. When I did the research, when I walked the site, this is how it made me feel when I went to visit it. I knew it was something special. I didn't go in with any preconceived ideas of what it was. Now, this is where the Shiva Lingam is located. And the Shiva Lingam is the most important part of this temple. It is the Holy Trinity, essentially, of preservation, the creator, and the destroyer, all in one. It's the balance, the harmonious balance of this entire space is centralized around this right here. And in Hinduism, this is actually translated as the womb, this particular room where the holiest of holies is located. So like I said before, if I go back to this slide here, this is located right here. So the Shiva Lingam is in the most eastern point and it's straight down, okay? So from that top down here, and like I said before, this is built all from one single monolithic hillside basalt. The hardest material, this is basically marble. The whole floor is polished, as you can see the devotees here in this picture. When you visit a temple, you're basically grounding yourself because they have energy in them. And our bodies create energy. So you're releasing that energy back and forth, essentially. So that's why you see the devotees are barefoot in these spaces, because there's vibration to it. The acoustics in here too, you'll hear the chanting when you go into a temple, and you're gonna hear different saints, different mantras, have different corresponding areas that you perform these in these temples. This is a top view of the temple. So like I said before, this right here is the Sanctum Sanctorum, and it goes straight down into the Shiva Lingam. This up here is where the main pavilion is. So let me go back to this slide. Above this is this section here. Well, I go into full detail on that in a second. Now I want to explain Shiva with you guys, just in very brief, just some symbolic references, that kind of thing, real quick. I'm going to use my little laser because I'm tech here. So this picture over here I took in Varanasi, which is it's the most holiest site in all of India. It's where Mahatma Ganges Ji is located, the holy river. And I like to think of Varanasi as a temple without walls. There is no, it's a river site. So you're going to see images of Mahadev. It's also an avatar of Shiva. Now, the 3 lines of ash on Shiva's head denote it's basically human fear, rage, and lust can be felled. So you can basically achieve moksha, liberation, by subduing these things, subduing your rage, fear, and keeping your emotions within balance. The cobra around his neck is Vasuki, and Vasuki is the passions and desires. So Vasuki is protecting the devotee from their passions and desires, keeping their passions within due bounds, etc. Also, it denotes full control of Maya, which is energy. And then in Hinduism, they say Maya, and you also hear the term veil of Maya. Now, the false illusion of energy, essentially. And Shiva's blue, like the sky and the ocean. It means that he's everywhere. He's always present. Now, I'm just going to explain briefly the Shiva Lingam, which I showed in this slide here. So where the Shiva Lingam is located, and I know we've heard this term before. So the Shiva Lingam is a divine balance. It's always located in the Garbhagritha, which is the womb of the temple. So after you circumnavigate it, you go to the center point, the holiest of holies, the Sanctum Sanctorum. That's where the Shiva Lingam is located. And where you pour the water, when you purify a Shiva Lingam, the water goes to the north. And it also energizes and removes negative vibrations. And when you look at a Shiva lingam, it's basically you have the lingam denotes Shiva on the top here. This is the feminine, the yoni, it's feminine form, Vishnu, the preserver, and at the bottom of everything is the creator or the architect. So you're having the three essences in play there. You have the masculine, you have the divine feminine, and then you have the idea of the principle behind it is that balance, that liberation, finding that peace within yourself to liberate, essentially. That's my commentary. And on the right here is an image of a Shivaling. This is when the devotee, this is a representation of a devotee, or sorry, pardon me, Shiva, emerging out of the Shiva Linga. So when you're in cosmic balance with the temple or through samadhi, which is deep meditation in these sites, you will find liberation. You will find moksha. Quick, real brief commentary on just Hinduism and this idea of reincarnation. So samsara is the idea of the cycle of rebirth and death in Dharma traditions. So the idea is you want to have liberation as from darkness. You want to be in balance with, hey, I have fear, I have rage in my life, I have all these things, but you have to preserve your energy. You have to be within balance to achieve liberation. You have to look at everything equally, all these senses. These temples teach all of our nature, all of our energy, all of our being. It doesn't matter what temple you're in either. It doesn't need to be, it could be a Masonic lodge, it could be a synagogue, it could be a mosque. There's so much beauty behind the idea of the physical and then the esoteric. So you're in this space, this temple, but the temple is actually you. Your work, the idea behind these temples is you take this knowledge, you take these teachings, and you create a living temple without walls, essentially yourself. So that's what Shivaling would be. So after you've reached that stage of your journey, liberation means that you're no longer in samsara. You break this cycle of rebirth, essentially. Like I said before, three principal deities in Hinduism. You have Shiva in the center there, you have Vishnu, and you have Brahma. So I went over Shiva a little bit about he's the destroyer. He also comes in many avatars. Hinduism has millions of gods, million of avatars. I could go over it all day, but we're here to talk about the temple. In the center there, you have Vishnu, the preserver. So Vishnu appears through Vedic texts when humanity needs salvation. So when you go to a temple, you're there for salvation. So it's the idea you have to put in the work to get the liberation. So that's kind of where the avatar will show up. If anybody's read the Bhagavad Gita, he shows up and he's giving advice to two different parties about the good and bad in life. And it's basically a teacher, which is a reflection of yourself. You have to learn from your mistakes. You have to be present. You have to preserve your energy in all directions. So when I look at Brahma's in the cardinal points, north, south, east, west. It means the reflection of energy around you. That's just a very brief commentary on that. Now, I want to talk about the architects of these temples. And this is some research I've been doing the last year on reading these ancient texts. And when you go through them and you look at different texts, this particular deity comes up, Vishwakarma. His name basically translates to architect of the universe. Now, he's the son of Brahma, creator, and he comes from Savarga, which is light. So you have the creator, and then you have the son, who is the architect of the universe, and his abode is light. He's coming from light. He's a god of craftsmen, architects, and worshipped by artisans as well. He holds a pasha, which is a noose, and that basically is emblematic of removing obstacles. And he also holds a gauge. So he's holding measuring. So he is associated with the Vastu Shastra, which is the knowledge of dwellings. And the Vastu Shastra is the most complete text on ancient architecture, design, and symbolic presence, and it is wild. And these books are thousands of years old, and the translations that we have, most of them were recently done in English from like the late 1800s and 1930s. And I like to think that the translations were done during kind of like the golden age of masonry, and when the Eastern philosophy really started to come into the Western form, people started to look back at these Vedic texts. So when you're going through them, there is so much similarity between, you know, different crafts and whatnot. But when you look at them also, when you see deities, when they have one leg up like this and then the other one is grounded, that's basically like an axis mundi. He's in both worlds. Now, Vastu Shastra is incredibly interesting, and I gotta move this around. Hold on, there we go. So Vastu Shastra, the art of dwelling, and the architectural books, they basically built on grid systems, and the ancient architects and sages would build temples based off of all these universal principles. It always had to do with direction, and then where you're at in the temple, they would have deities that were the identical part of these cosmic connections. So when you're in the northeast, it's representing water and Jupiter. The center of the temple is Brahma. So if you're closest to the Shiva Lingam, you're the closest to the creator, the energy source of the temple, right? So imagine an altar, you're in the closest space. That's why you're going around an altar, essentially coming back to this point, and you're in the center of all direction. You're in all being. It's being present in a space alchemically. The square in Hinduism also is emblematic of the human form. So it's the same thing. It's like, imagine the Brahma as yourself. Like, hey, if I'm facing this, I have my energy is all around me. So instead of thinking of cardinal points of just direction, think of it as, how am I treating the world around me in all direction? How am I treating this person? How am I treating that person? And so forth. The ancient architects and sages would use sundials when they first came out, all throughout India as well. There's a beautiful astrological site in Jaipur that has sundials that are just absolutely magnificent. And they knew about astrology thousands of years ago when they laid out these temples. In the sundial, they would draw the grid from the ground and start from the ground up, essentially. The architects in the books, the ancient Vedic texts, like the Manasara and the Mayamata, there's actual consequences for improperly doing the work. So if they didn't have the grid perfectly, if the statue was facing a certain way, if the deity wasn't in the proper grid, right? Because we're looking at a site here, this is how they built it. They wanted to have the devotees facing northeast. That is where the light is coming from, essentially, right? So when the sun rises in the east, that's where you're positioned inside a temple. But the consequences are really interesting. When you read the Vedic text, there's stuff like, if it wasn't perfectly square, you would have this disease may happen to the architects. So they were very, very strict on their building designs. The architects would work with the sages the entire time. There's a passage in the Manasara where they talk about the chiseling of the eye of the deity and how important that whole section could be, like 10 pages long, on how you chisel this deity's eye. So also the Vedic text, the Vastu Shastra, it's very similar to, you could compare it to feng shui, right, in the Chinese literature, but it's so old. There are specific guidelines for choosing a site as well that's mentioned in these texts. So when they would choose a site, they would bring in cows, and how the cows reacted to the site was how they would choose it. There's a whole section on the nature and the balance of the natural form before a temple was built. What is the foundation like? Is there water there? All these temples are built right next to water. They house water. They want to make sure they have good sunlight. They want to make sure that there's like a habitat that's being built around them. And when you look at some of the older Vedic texts, they also have, in Vastu Shastra, They talk about city building and how they would build villages and homes. People to this day still use Vasta Shastra when they set up their homes. Like there's certain ways where you should store your food in your home. So it is, when I look back on the temple site and I know about Vastu Shastra, I'm like, this isn't coincidence. Everything has a permanence and a presence here. Like that's how it speaks to you in a sense. When it's talking about how you get energy from a temple, if you go to Europe and you're in a cathedral and you hear the way the building, when there's a hymn or there's singing going on, it resonates through your body, and that's not by just coincidence. So Vastu Shastra is such an old piece of literature that has obviously been, through time, different people have looked at this and used it in different building sites all throughout the world. And the main component that I want to get home with a temple building is that architects and sages built these temples on the core beliefs of creating harmony. Harmony being the number one thing with a temple or with a village or with a dwelling. We all want to live in harmony, right? So that is a core fundamental belief behind the temple building, is creating a space of harmony and acceptance. Now, I can't talk about the Vastu Shastra without mentioning the Sri Yantra. And this was used as well in temple design, and it's still used to this day. It was funny, I was listening to somebody talk about New Jersey has a beautiful Mandir Hindu temple there, and people are flabbergasted on how it was built. And they're like, we don't know how it was done. I'm like, you got to look at the Vastu Shastra and the Sri Yantra. Sri Yantra, pardon me, translates to, it's a tool of knowledge. It's a working tool. It's made of 9 triangles that denote Shivaji. So, right, we talked about Shiva earlier. So it's a mixture of masculine energy and 5 triangles facing down, denoting the female energy. It always faces in the east, because you can also use this not only as a Vastu Shastra like grid pattern, but this is the internal Vastu Shastra, if that makes sense. So I showed you the grid on which the architects are building. Now the Sri Yantra is to build the temple without walls. So this is their working tool. The earliest yantras were found in Bagar stone, 9,000 to 8,000 BC, and is a ritual site in India. And when you see these things have been around for thousands and thousands of years. I'm just going to briefly go over this real quick. Let me get my little laser out. Okay. So I want you to remember this. I want you to take a look at this, right? We're seeing this is the Sri Yantra. I'm going to explain it real quick. The outside square is the earth and its boundaries in the physical world, and the niches are directional: north, south, east, and west. These 3 circles here denote past, present, and future. The 16 petals of the lotus represent the human body and the elements earth, wind, fire, water, and space. And the last petal represents the mind. So the initiate, the being, the person, the self. And then the middle part here, the bindu, when you see the bindu, the third eye, that's essential of full consciousness. That's the Shivaling, in a sense, in the physical form. So you're being that, when I see a bindu, for me, it's a presence. It's like, hey, I'm present in a weird way. And like I talked about before, the veil of Maya is the veil of illusion. And that is basically outside of your Sri Yantra, outside of your boundaries and your passions, essentially, is all the confusion lies, right? So if you don't have proper boundaries in your life, or you can't separate your desires and know that our desires lead to suffering, and what suffering is, you can get conflicted. That's kind of the overall commentary on this. Now, remember this symbol here. So the Sri Yantra. Now, this is the top of Kailasha Temple. I love this image. I did not take this photo. It's super beautiful. But if you look, this looks very similar to a Sri Yantra just on the top of it. And that was the first thing when I saw this, and I was standing up. I was actually over here when I took photographs of the site. I looked at this and I said, that's a Sri Yantra. You also have the 4 lions in the cardinal points as well, with the niches, north, south, east, west. And obviously right here, we have an image of Shiva in between the cosmic divine. He's in balance. He's in presence. That's his form here. And then below this, that's where the Shiva Lingam is located. But the top, you have the lions, which is denoting, strength. It's like strengthen your boundaries. What are your boundaries? Like I said before, these temples are these are masterpieces of living art and symbolic of so many different beautiful things. And you can find this in any temple site. It doesn't have to be a Hindu site. It can be in ancient Egypt. I've seen similar forms of these tools of ancient knowledge and these ideas, right? This is another picture from the top there, as you can see. So you can really see how elaborate this temple is. And you have the mirrored image. This is the thing they'll do continuously. So off the Vastu Shastra, you're building straight up and you're using squares and circles, squares and circles. Now the square, like I said before, is that of human form. And then the symbol is your boundary outside of it. So it's that navigating the earth around you, your energy, and then the square of self, right? So squaring your dharma, squaring your actions, and so forth. Just want to briefly touch on one of the first symbols I saw when I was in the temple was the story of Ravanaji and the journey for Atmalinga. And I love this sculpture is dug in, and Ravanaji basically is in a short sense here, he is he's associated with lust. He's an expert warrior. He was a politician, king, as well as an astrologer, doctor, ancient Ayurvedic being ancient medicine and kind of magic alchemical components. And Ravana really was, when you read Vedic texts, you're going to read about Ravanaji. And it's basically the human story of all these different senses. We have lust, anger, delusion, greed, pride, envy, the mind, the intellect, the will, ego, all these things that are what we project on humanity. This is just a natural thing that we do. So real briefly, Ravanaji's story, he had a quest for the Shiva Lingam, and he can never achieve it because you see here on the Lingam, okay, so this is the Shiva Lingam. He wants to have the all-knowing knowledge of self. Atma is self in Sanskrit. It means myself. Lingam is the connection of self and the divine. So you're one with the essence. But you see here, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We have 9 of the heads of Ravanaji. He was a 10-headed deity. But he can never achieve Atmalinga because he couldn't kill his pride. So when you look at the statue here, he has a sword by his head, on his 10th head, which is emblematic of his pride. So it's about ego death and about how, like I said, with doing commentaries, when I do a presentation, it's never from an expert standpoint. It's a commentary. This is just coming from my interpretation of these symbols and the research that I'm doing. So when I saw this, I was absolutely stuck in my spot, and I was observing this. And before I knew really the entire story in some of the Puranas, the other texts, which are teaching stories about Ravanaji and Shiva, it was beautiful. I just thought, it's such a message from the past. So like I said, temples teach a message. You don't have to be a Hindu. You don't have to be Christian. It doesn't matter. There's no wrong way to explore a temple and what it was going to give back to you. It's the same idea kind of with Masonry, how we accept all beliefs, we accept all people, and it's creating that harmony. So if you don't have that if you go into a lodge or you go somewhere and you have ego, pride, that is not going to create harmony around you. So look back on the Sri Yantra tool and you'll see the steps, some of these little working things and whatnot, and the relationships. Real quick, I'll touch on Ganesh. Ganesh's imagery and iconography is all over the temple. Ganesh is Lord of the people. He's kind of like a guide when you look at the ancient texts. He teaches lessons through the symbolism which he is positioned. So when you're traveling in the temple, you might see him with a big head, denotes thinking big, large ears, listening more. Small eyes means to concentrate. The trunk is also emblematic of the Om symbol, so high efficiency and adaptability. Um, there's so many different things. He guides you all throughout the temple, and his imagery changes depending where you are located in the complex. So as the devotee goes through and they're doing their navigation, you're going to see different forms of Ganesh. You're going to see different forms of Shiva, different avatars being symbolic of looking at things a little differently. Maybe it affects you a little differently. Holding a pasha, which is binding us. And then lastly, Horus and Ganesh have a lot of similarities in their stories. Ganesh is the son of Shiva. Horus is the son of Osiris. And I like to think of Ganesh as the senior deacon in the lodge and his position there. So the brothers will understand a little bit about that, being the guide and showing you these things. And there's just so much different imagery you can go through. This is some pictures of Ganesh set up in the temple. I know this temple is so old and it's been through all sorts of different dynasties and people, but these are some of the images. You can also see here Ganesh wearing the Vasuki, so the reminder to keep our passions and desires within bounds. So you'll see stuff like that all throughout. These are some other images of Ganesh. I took this in Varanasi, which you can see there. And then back to Elora and just kind of some general stuff, and I'll take some questions with you guys. The rest of the cave complexes are all throughout that area. You have cave complexes like this. This is a Buddhist one. And when you're looking at this from the back, this is probably 150 feet carved into a temple, like into the hillside of basalt volcanic building. I mean, not building, pardon me, hillside. And somehow the sun shines right in there. So when the sun's in the west, it's shining on the face. And this is every day. If you go to visit these sites, they're built so in tune with the cosmos and all these different principles where it's like there is no mistake. So the idea that it appeared out of nowhere, go back to the Vedic texts and you'll see point blank how they did it. It's all there, black and white. It's very, very interesting. And Elora Caves also has Jain temples as well. So it's the only site. There's Ajanta Caves as well that's over in this area. And it's the only site that has Jain, Hindu, and Buddhists all together. This is this is another cave temple there in Elora. Yeah, I'm wearing a Chris Isaac shirt there, guys. Oh, sorry, but this temple is the Buddha here. And as you can look up in the top here, the way this is built, this all resonates. So if you do an Om, say you say Om in there, you do different mantras, you're going to have a different form is going to come back to you in a sense. So these sites are absolutely incredible. And this is all carved straight into the side of a basalt volcanic site. And it goes all the way back. So when you look at it, it's just truly, truly remarkable. This is another one. This is a Jain temple there. So you'll see the arches here. And these are all kind of like they give the presence of the being or the deity or that energy, right? That we're all looking for, looking back on you. So they're looking out from a window, and it's very fascinating. You know, we're always, you watch these TV shows and people are like, oh, they're in a spacecraft. It's the first thing that everybody wants to go to. And there's so much, when you dive into it, it's just a beautiful story in stone. And this is just one site in India. There's so many different ones. So I'll show you guys a couple more pictures and then I'll take some questions. This is in Mumbai. This is the Grand Lodge in Mumbai. And Masonry came to India it was actually after the combining into the Grand Lodge of England in 1717. India had lodges in the 1700s. So there were Masons all throughout India and through the trading. If you visit Mumbai, you will see the same architecture that you would see in London, Scotland, some of these places. You're going to the same Masonic symbols that you would see in our country here all throughout. Like the train station was built by a Mason, like Freemason architect in Mumbai. All the buildings there all aligned a certain way. And I just want to share this video of the top of the temple with you guys. So when I was showing you from the top of Kailasha, this is how big it is. And you can see how, and then this is in the Sanctum Sanctorum where the Shiva Lingam is. So remember, built from the top down and then in. And then lastly, I just wanted to share a Zoroastrian fire temple with you guys that's in Mumbai. Very fascinating, and the history of Zoroastrianism in India is, that's just another rabbit hole for another day. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you very much. And if you guys have questions, I'd love to answer anybody. And I just want to lastly, just the journey into visiting all these temples and the overall understanding that I have is just create harmony where you can in your life and be present with people, give them time, give them good energy. And that's it. So I got. So thank you very much.